was born in Stuttgart, horrible city. I don't like it at all. I even don't want to be buried there. So yeah, I left Stuttgart when I was starting to study, and only be there if I visit my mom.
Thomas, I met you only today,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a really, really interesting, intense discussion we had on certain issues. I would like just to start out with you introducing not the south of Germany where you're not going to be buried, but Lampedusa.
Mm-hmm.
Will you give us a small travel into the world of this Italian island?
It's a jump.
Yeah, it's a jump.
It's
Yes.
yeah. I became artist when I failed to be politician, and being invited to exhibitions, I normally try to think what is the biggest problem for me, and looking at it as well from different perspectives, political perspectives, social issues, but as well aesthetic issues, and tried how can it be colliding. And in this case, I was invited to do a solo show in Italy, 2008, in a wonderful space in Reggio Emilia. And I came up with a concept. The invitation was 2007. Berlusconi at that time was prime minister in Italy. And I was very much appalled about the issue, how Berlusconi's government mainly dealt with the influx. Migration came to, at this point, not only to Sicily, but as well in big numbers to Lampedusa. And I wanted to develop a sign of welcoming and not fencing Europe off, like creating this fortress of Europe. And it was very simple and very basic. The idea to build a lighthouse then came up, and with double function. On the one side, to help people in these nutshells to navigate and find the land, where is the land, and on the other side to promote the idea to establish a cultural center in Lampedusa, because in Lampedusa nothing exists actually for people to have an exchange on art, music, on a contemporary base. It's the church, the only thing which exists there as a cultural space.
Do you mind just describing short Lampedusa?
Yeah, the island actually is about 6,000 inhabitants maximum. So it's pretty small. I think it's 15 square kilometers big. So if you are standing on the highest point, you see all the edges and you see the sea. You have the feeling you can see Africa, but you can't. So the closest point between Central Europe and Africa is Lampedusa. It's actually African soil, but occupied now or colonized some 200 years ago. And it's closer to Africa than to Sicily, Lampedusa. It's about 100 kilometers south of Sicily. And the departure mainly goes from Libya, if migrants come to Lampedusa. You see a cemetery of ships with which carried migrants to Europe. The first thing we European are doing with these are to destroy them, that they are not usable anymore. They are somehow really wonderful boats. one idea was that I built the model of for my lighthouse. I built it with material from Lampedusa, from the boats, but it was so difficult to get it split and dissected. The boats, even they are too small to cross the sea, they are quite solidly made, and my chainsaw was too small, or it was not the right tool to cut. So I made this model in this metal with mesh wire and construction site material, and this is the model I built in Naples, in South Italy, and was in public space for 4 weeks. And I made several models. One is in Switzerland at the moment, traveling, and but they are more symbolic. They are of course not having the function like I dream of to realize in Lampedusa itself. I guess the political situation in Lampedusa itself does not allow that at the moment. The mayor is, I think, hesitating to take it on. I wish this would be a little bit more open and provocative. She's very nice, and she gave very, very helpful comments when the big tragedies happened. But to set up this project would mean she has to moderate within her own community in Lampedusa, that this sends out a positive message from Lampedusa. That's the idea as well. But they have then maybe contradiction. Will there be more migrants come and stuff like this? This is, for example, the center of migration in Lampedusa. When I was there, it was totally overcrowded, 2009, in winter time. So bad living conditions, they set fire to it twice, migrants. I think Lampedusa is sort of role model for the whole notion of migration to Europe. It's of course not the only point where a lot of migrants arrive on their way for a better life, let's say, or search for a better life. They want to come not to Lampedusa as such. It's sort of a transition situation. And for this reason, my model normally is as well something like a transition sculpture installation where people can walk through. And
were the inhabitants, the citizens of Lampedusa and the refugees, were they ever a part of the project? Or?
That's the idea.
That's
if I built it
yes,
in Lampedusa, that I built it together with migrants and people in Lampedusa, and built it together. And
what were their reactions to inviting?
I had several meetings with different people. One meeting was in the church, and about 40 people from Lampedusa came, and it was very positive. I was really astonished. And you know, these people, they have a history, a very, very deep history of deciding whether to help people who need help in this situation of they just arrive, they don't have anything, or you don't. And because at the beginning of this phenomenon that the people arrive, no state was present. It was a very personal decision and an informal situation, and people went there with bread or blankets and helped, and others did not. So it's everywhere in the world. You find those and these, it's a phenomenon now 20 years in Lampedusa at least, if not longer. And the numbers are increasing, and I think what I wished, of course, what we establish, that we establish legal ways to come to Europe, so that people are not in need to enter these unsafe nutshells. And that would mean that the politics open embassies and create the opportunity that you can buy a plane ticket because you are not in safe living conditions in Libya, which is a consequence of a war against Gaddafi. 2012 was started. The very year the EU got the Peace Nobel Prize. So for me, a big contradiction. Not only 3,000 people drowned 2012 in the sea, but as well a war was launched. And nowadays the situation in Libya is totally anarchy, is not a stable situation. And we are wondering why so many people come. I wish that the European politics does a change, that we don't develop only the feeling we have to protect our privilege, which basically runs, I think, the motivation of the current politics. And of course, then in the meanwhile, we are now about 8 years later, the situation changed. Last month, you saw all of us and follow it up, that migration is increasing rapidly. And it's a consequence of politics that are failed, that the imbalance, what as well Renzo addressed, the imbalance of poverty and rich is so enormous. And instead of that this is tried to decrease, it is increasing. And I think the whole problem of migration and even refugees, asylum seekers will not diminish. It's, I guess,
so what's the
our next generation will be, if we don't change the politics, it will follow us and stay with us for the next generation.
So I'm thinking now that the language of the Lampedusa beam, what are you, as an artist, what is your answer? What is your answer here?
I found it very interesting. Renzo said, I can't solve the problem. And the question for artists is, do I need to solve the problems, social problems, political problems, conflicts? Who is meant to be the one who should solve it? And of course, as an artist, I don't define myself as being the one who has to develop the solution, but some artists try that, Niels Norman or others, and they do alternative models of socializing, and Renzo as well, I consider, is searching for solutions. But of course, this is the task for politics. The politic has to solve political problems. That's the issue, to develop solution how we can live and share our lives together. And as artist, I see mainly my ability to put questions on the table and address issues I'm concerned about, and they matter, and they need, and they cry for solutions, and they are very difficult to solve. I'm totally sure. I mean, but I see it's a consequence, and a consequence of politics I somehow gain from, that I have privilege, I can travel everywhere, I can make my living more or less with how I live and what I do, and many others can't do it. So I would like to share our ability to have a good life. And so I see the Lighthouse project of course, as an aesthetic project as well at the same time, and it can develop really nice aesthetics. So, to my feeling, and I keep it with very like Friedrich Schiller, that the beauty paves the way to freedom, or at least he was one of the first to develop this idea that aesthetics and art has an impact on the society. And in this tradition, I try to be one voice. But of course, our voice as artists, it's really small. We have a small impact on the society.
And that's what I'm thinking right now, because you have 2015, you have 1 million refugees influx from Syria, some of them not in wooden boats, but in rubber boats or
dingy boats.
Yes, exactly. So I'm thinking of what are the opportunities for impact? Even though you say you're raising questions or you're underlining or addressing issues of society, but what are the, let's say you want to have impact on the human rights. Let's say, what are the opportunities for this? Because in fact we didn't see too many changes in 2008. In fact, I'm looking even further back in history. I know it's a complicated question, but
it is complicated. I mean, if we look back the last 25 years, since let's say there was the imploding of Realsozialismus, the real socialism, Warsaw Pact came down. So a fundamental or a very general idea of living together did not work anymore. And since then we see in Europe, I think, a tendency towards conservative issues. In Europe, the extreme conservative, or let's say nationalistic parties gained and got more and more influence, which is really scary. In France, Marine Le Pen,
Hungary,
everywhere, Hungary.
Denmark.
The Prime Minister promotes the sentence, "There's no right for a better life," Viktor Orban, which is a terrible assault on the human rights. And so on. And new fences are going to be built, or are already built, and so on. So, as well today here we had to register, which I think it's a completely wrong direction to create security. If Islamists would come in here and shoot down us, my registration, your registration would not help. So there are activities, they are pseudo-activities, and it's surveillance. The state gets more power in France, a state of emergency, and giving police a lot of rights, and so on. So, of course, I see a conflict is in our presence, and I don't, and I think we need to address terrorism, of course, but it's a consequence as well of. I mean, if we talk about the guys who committed these atrocities, some of them, they lived among us in Europe, but I think they didn't experience respect. They experienced being outlawed, being not part of the society, and it's very difficult to live together if you have different cultural values. But I think I would like not only to send bombers. I don't think it's a solution at all. I think this politics in the last 15 years since September 11 failed. Iraq is not a safer place. Afghanistan is not a safer place. And Europe is not a safer place. So instead of going the only direct interventionist and military way, I think we should try to come in touch and communicate our different values. And even they are very conservative and Islamistic, and I find it absolutely not attractive. But we have to find where can we communicate and where is the end of communication. And of course, if there is someone with a gun in front of me, there's no communication anymore.
I want to hold on to this. We're not going to solve the problem today anyway, but we can address some issues. I was thinking just recently, an American artist, she got in touch with me and she was presenting an art project called, I think, the Kulturjüdische Verbund or something like that. It was actually an art and sociologist and a sort of an anthropologist project addressing the suppression of art during the Nazi period in Europe. And I was just, that's not to dig into that topic, it's more to address the fact that she was approaching me with this project, asking me if I could think of somewhere to present the idea in the context of Europe. And certainly I could. So my question to you is, do you also see this rising as a new question, the suppression of art in the present context? Because I'm sure that her project is arriving from somewhere not only historical but also relating to the present context. So do you see the role of art changing? Do you see yourself fighting to express yourself with these issues that you're bringing into the stage today?
Maybe the role of art as well changes, but I see there as well a tradition that art always was between the power and the people somehow, even in the medieval, whether you had to serve the king or before the church, and are you just affirmative or as well developing a critique? And some artists were able to do both and bring it together and serve the people, and the king was happy because it was well done. And of course we have to fight for this right to speak out, where if there is a tendency or discussion in Denmark I didn't know about actually.
No, well, this came out of the US.
Or this artist from the from the US. Of course, there are certain political power structures. Maybe they don't want us to speak out, but I wouldn't victimize myself in this, or me as an artist. I think we have a lot of opportunities and we don't use them. And I think this is more the situation for us here in Europe. If you are going to other parts of the world, it might be different. But I think as long as we have the freedom to speak out, all artists should try to do it. And the limits we will face maybe at some point. But I don't think it's a general problem not to be able to speak out. I think there's a lot of victimization, or of course we are not very powerful. But if you want to be powerful, you have to be a football trainer or a politician, but not an artist. And so you have the wrong job.
Thomas, I think we're heading towards the end, and I was just thinking, what's the next step with Lampedusa, or this kind of...
I think the next step is to build it in Brussels, in front of the European Parliament. I don't know. I certainly will go back to Lampedusa and promote the idea and figure it out. To what extent can we make a model, at least at some point, and to meet friends in Lampedusa, and of course it's not about Lampedusa as such. It's on the issue of migration and towards promoting the idea to open up legal ways and how we can develop a culture of welcoming and living together, so that we don't need to think only to help others, because this is as well a power structure which is not a stable one. We should live together. That's more stable.
I think that's a wonderful final remark. Stability and living together. I appreciate that, Thomas. I think we should all give a hand for a very brave artist here. And I want to thank you for inviting us to see and watch what you're doing.
Thank you for having me here.
Very interesting.
Thanks.
It's been a lovely contribution.
Thanks.